Okay, yeah, I'm ready whenever you are. So yeah, hi, I'm Hendrus. I'm the writing lead and the team lead for Atmora, and I'm also a writer on Roskrea, on well, Atmora, and on elsewhere a bit. I used to also be on Alinor, but that's been a bit shelved. So yeah, that's that. And today we're going to take a thorough look at plots and pitches, or also known as how to actually get your characters to do stuff. First and foremost, if you've got any questions whatsoever, you're more than welcome to hop in, to chime in, or to post the question in the lecture hall chat, text chat. I'll be having that open on the site. So if something's unclear, just let me know and I'll try to clarify. Right, let's get started. First,
Sorry, just before we start, I'm unable to write within the open chat for the lecture hall.
the lecture hall chat,
Yeah.
not the chat that is part of
Okay, I see.
yeah,
Sorry
okay,
for that.
yeah.
And would you want us to write in or to chime in with voice?
Whatever you're more comfortable with.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Sure. So, a quick disclaimer: what I'm about to tell you is not gospel. Take it with a grain of salt. It's different for anyone, or for everyone does it differently. But the basic is that write what you know, and write what you think is fun. Because if it works, it works. If you get to it on a different path or through some weird hoops, who cares? As long as it's good. There's a lot of like formula and writing theory behind it, but in general, don't try to have your story just fit a mold endlessly. You don't need to just break your own quest or your own story down to make it fit a mold. If it doesn't fit a mold, that's totally fine. Don't compromise on your own thing just to make it fit something else. As long as it's not the CK, because we kind of need to do that daily. But yeah. Lastly, about the write what you know thing. So this is like a really cool old thing, but if you want to write something, it's best for you to actually kind of know what you're writing about. If you don't know something but you want to write about it, then the best way to fix that is to either grab a book or Google it or watch a documentary about it. And half of the fun is just learning about new stuff. And it's also totally all right to go on tangents and to go into rabbit holes and to look here and there and elsewhere. It's happened to me twice that I've tried looking over, is this plant native to region X? And then, boom, suddenly, a couple hours later, I was looking at documentaries about chocolate. Like, that's normal. Everyone does it. Don't feel bad about it. And now that I've got you, everyone looking like like this, here's the itinerary or the schedule for today. We're gonna take a look at the protagonists, at antagonists, then we'll swoop over to the actual plot and story part, where we go over where we're going to go over inciting incidents and how to start a story. After that, I'm going to explain a couple of story types that are fairly common and what you want to be on the lookout for when dealing with these common, not tropes, but just types of plots. And lastly, we're going to put everything together, and hopefully, at the end of this lecture, you have a good story pitch that you can work on for a quest, or for an NPC, or for something longer, or like, I don't know, even just a book. It doesn't have to be Skyrim or Elder Scrolls related, but just writing. We're trying to just go over like brainstorming and the starting stuff here today. Right. I brought you a small, quotation here, or a quote, taken from The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxis, about how sometimes the story can start a bit more unconventional. That in the beginning, the universe was created. This had made many people very angry and has been widely regarded as a bad move. That is to say, you can start your story whenever. Some stories start with the literal Big Bang, others start with the birth of the main character, or when they turn 11, or when they turn 55. Doesn't matter. Every story starts differently. But hang on. You probably have heard about plot or maybe even plot armor before, but what exactly is that? So, plot by many is considered to be the skeleton of a story. If your story is like a cool looking body with like skin, organs, muscles, and everything that, well, body has, the plot is a skeleton. Some people view it that everything has a skeleton, and if you take out the skeleton, everything falls apart. That's not always the case, but it is in many cases the case. More often than not, a plot is really just a process. It's the process of your story moving forward. Plot is like this invisible hand that just pushes things forward. Can be your characters, can be inciting incidents that suddenly happen. Plot generally just pushes things forward to their conclusion. You need to actually get from Act 1 to Act 2 to get to Act 3. So plot is this thing that just pushes people. And lastly, plot often has patterns attached to it. If you were to be reincarnated into a fictional story, you're going to start noticing that things are going to happen in sets of threes. 3 brothers, 3 trials. It's all over the place, and it's called the rule of 3, and we all love it. You can even just it's great. And other patterns would be just specific to the like type of story that you're trying to tell. So if you're going to write like this really nitty gritty noir type of crime story, there's probably always going to be the damsel in distress. There's going to be the boiled heart detective. There's always going to be something along those lines, which you can just use to. You can basically use these things as a guide on what to do next. So let's start with the beginning. The beginning, or the first act, really, is what we call the setup phase. We set up everything important. We're going to set up the story, the setting, so the world, the characters, who lives in the world, what happened in the world, and we're going to just introduce everything on its own pace to the audience or to the reader or to the player. Let's take, for example, The Hobbit. The first chapter is all about Hobbiton and the hill and Bilbo's family and, well, Bilbo himself. So we're going to just give the audience a way to look into the story and see what they are dealing with. When we introduce characters, we also want to make sure that the audience knows who they are and, more importantly, what do they want. Want is something that's going to be incredibly important later on in the lecture. And just keep in mind that a character should always have some sort of goal. Aristotle, that's a guy who lives in ancient Greece, he always said that characters really only want either happiness or misery. In most cases, it's happiness for themselves or misery for others. It can be just something as simple as that. Someone wants to be happy. They want to get the girl. They want to actually really eat this pie on the other side of the street that's like cooling off on the windowsill. Someone always wants something. And this is where we set up this like little want. We're going to just show what characters really want to do. Going back to Hobbit, when we first meet Bilbo, it's like, okay, yeah, he's a Baggins. They really want to just only like relax. They want to eat. They want to be just sitting for the 4 o'clock tea. But then there's also the Took side of him, and the Took side wants to explore, wants to go on adventures. That's also what we learn in the just first chapter. with how Belladonna took and the Great Old took were like these really cool adventurers, and we can even apply this to like Skyrim. When we first meet Ulfric in the cart, we kind of know what he's about. He's a rebellion leader. He wants something, and later on we figure out that this something is Skyrim's independence, and that's going to be the driving force behind this character. Everything the character does is to achieve this want, and everything like this is just developed during the first act. So the setup can be more than just a quick introduction to the setting. The first act is as long as you need it to be. Another small thing that a lot of first acts and a lot of beginnings do is that they fit the story that they're going to tell. So a slow story has a really slow beginning. A fast and action-packed story, like, I don't know, it's a fast action-packed story generally has a fast and action-packed opening, or a like setup phase where everything happens quickly, someone dies, another thing explodes, and by the time that you finish watching or reading the introduction or the setup phase, you kind of have a good understanding about what excuse me, about what the story actually is about. Right. The second act, or really just the middle part, this is where things happen. This part is where the character goes out according to their wants. They basically you set up a want, and then the second act is just the character trying to get what they want. Easy as that. Things happen, adventures happen, the tension rises. Characters just move and act accordingly to their own wants, fears, flaws, goals, everything really. And in most cases, it's really just a matter of cause and effect. If you really want that pie over in the windowsill, you first have to actually get to the windowsill. So you're going to climb over a fence. Maybe, boom, there's a dog in the front yard, and that dog is angry because you're on their territory. So now the character has to go and get a bone. But where do they get the bone from? Of course, from the butcher. But the butcher's closed. That's like that's the entire basis of the second act, about things just happening. The protagonist runs into problems and then just tries to solve these problems. In many cases, well, not in many cases, but in our good old classic cases about Greek mythology or like classical literature, this is usually where the gods come in. Like, you've probably heard about a Deus Ex Machina, which is just, I think it translates to the god of the machine. It's really just something really unexpected and often divine happening to the character so that they actually can overcome these problems. A gust of wind propels them into the right direction. I don't know. Just things happen, and oftentimes classical literature used these gods to make things solve themselves. Something to be mindful of, though, is that you should avoid too convenient or too coincidental. You should avoid too convenient solutions, and that you don't really want to just have luck be the thing that saves the player. I know luck has been like this huge thing, especially for the Thieves Guild in Skyrim, but ooh, okay. Where was I? Right, luck. So luck has been this like driving force thing, but why luck? Like, yeah, a thief's luck might be important, but luck is a really bad plot device because it can happen to everyone at any time, and it just kind of undermines the character. Like, yeah, your character can run through the entire village to get the butcher, to open up the butchery to get the bone for the dog, but imagine if just a bone fell out of the window somewhere. It would just invalidate the character's like drive to do things. So it's like, oh yeah, I can do this totally hard part and then this really difficult quest, or I could just wait and hope that something good happens to me. But no real personal character would think like that, so it's best to just leave Lady Luck out of the equation. Last thing is that Hollywood adores the rule of 3 here as well. There's like three tasks that the player needs to do, or 3 quests, or 3 beasts to slay. Best example that I can give at the moment is like almost every Legend of Zelda game, where they have you collect like 3 important somethings, and then something happens, and then you need to collect more items, but this time it's more than 3. Like, it happens everywhere. Ocarina of Time, Twilight Princess, Windbreaker. It just happens in fiction. Things happen in 3s, or in sets of 3s. Right, and lastly, we'll go to the end, or the third and final act. You can see even acts come in 3s. So, the third act usually begins with a climax. It begins with your character finally getting that pie, and then falling action and announcement. So, okay, they have the pie. What now? Do they eat it? If so, then they're going to be very stuffed and full, and they're going to have to crawl back to their own home. If they just pocket the pie, maybe it's still too hot, and they're going to, I don't know, splat the pie on the pavement. Who knows? In the third act, things are resolved. Everything that the second act leads towards is explained, resolved, or bested in the third act. If you've got an antagonist, in this case it would probably be the pie or the dog. This is where the antagonist is like contained, bested, killed, reformed, whatever. Maybe the dog also had a slice of pie. So yeah, things are explained, and at the end of the end, hopefully, the audience will go out with a sense that they kind of now know the important bits. There can still be a couple of unresolved things here or there, but that's usually something to be addressed for the eventual sequel. Right, let's go over how plot can interact with, especially the protagonist. I'm going to use hero and protagonist interchangeably here. A protagonist doesn't always have to be the hero, but they often are. Or the good guy, I suppose. But yeah, so the most common way to start something is where the plot happens to the hero. The hero is all hunky-dory, it's going to be fine somewhere, it's living happily ever after, and then something happens. Like, boom, a dragon attacks Helgen, or, I don't know, someone stumbles and falls down the stairs and dies, or, I don't know, a different one gets their head stuck in a kettle, leading to an entire adventure about trying to get this man out of the kettle. Who knows? This event that sets things into motion is also known as the inciting incident. It's just something that happens, and I'm going to come back to it later. Basically, plot happening to the hero means that hero is just living somewhere, then the inciting incident happens, and then the hero has to just move because time's wasting, and they gotta get that stuff done. It can also lead to the hero or the protagonist getting a proper goal or motivation. Because their mother has fallen sick, they now really want to get that medicine, and they think like, okay, yeah, now it's either do or die. I need to actually get this medicine now, or someone's gonna feel really bad for the next couple of weeks. This is really often used in, like, again, classical literature. In Journey to the West, the Iliad, it's everywhere. It's even Hobbit. It's simple, it's straightforward, and it's a good and tried and true way of starting things. However, if you're just going to have an inciting incident start somewhere in a generic medieval fantasy, that kind of tends to be boring. You can see it with Oblivion and with Skyrim. Like, yeah, they've got somewhat of generic fantasy worlds, but Oblivion starts you in a cell with the Emperor suddenly showing up, and Skyrim starts with your own execution, which is kind of a twist on this whole thing about starting from somewhere. There we go. So the other one is a subversion that I've only really seen popping up recently, and it's really fun. It's when the hero happens to the plot or the protagonist. The inciting incident happens, but we don't get to see it, and it's not important. It's amazing. The entire thing is just completely driven by the protagonist. Like their want or their motivation is just so strong that they're gonna basically pull a I'm not locked in here with you, but you're locked in here with me, and they're just going to pull everything and everyone forward on their own accord. It's a really fun way to introduce a charismatic, fun, and probably very chaotic, probably also a very chaotic protagonist. But however, it can often be a bit confusing if your story starts with the protagonist just casually dismembering some evildoer, and you're not given a lot of like time to set up or to just prepare for that. The audience is gonna feel a bit lost. So you have to figure out a way to do the setups in between the different story beats that are going to happen. An easy fix for that is just a flashback. As long as the flashback doesn't happen at the start, because this would also just again be an inciting incident, you should be fine. So yeah, it's something that's popped up. Let's see, where did it pop up? I can think of a manga called Store Hero, where that just started. There's Chainsaw Man recently that also has had this like, we're going to be just thrown into the world. Well, the original. There's Doom from 2016 that also just started with that. Something happened, but the protagonist just does not care about it, and they are just gonna be completely focused on getting their goal done, to just achieve their goal by any means necessary, and neither the plot nor the audience is going to get a breather until the protagonist achieves that goal. Right, and let's actually get over to the meat now. How to build upon that. So you've got now the protagonist with the want, with the goal, and now you have to kind of do something with it. Here, we just have tension building. Tension is just like, okay, yeah, so the character goes out, then what? Now we are trying to figure out what is. Let's go back to the pie on the windowsill here. Maybe it's not one dog, but it's 7 dogs. That's more tension. Maybe it's not a single story house that has the pie resting upon it, but instead it's a 5-story house. The bigger the 7 dogs, exactly. The bigger the hurdles for the protagonist are, the higher the tension will be, and the more fun you will have, believe me. It can just be really anything. Ooh, Pat's asking a good question. Can you guys think of examples of quests or stories you've read where you were bored due to the lack of tension? Okay, I'm not gonna actually think about that because I need to. I have a lecture to actually go through. But yeah. So, in a way, you kind of want to just have tension high, not at an all-time high, but it should be slowly but surely rising. Things should escalate a little. And the best way to escalate things a little is by including an antagonist. The antagonist is someone who pushes against the protagonist. In our case, it's gonna be either one of the 7 dogs, who's especially ferocious, or maybe even the owner of the dog and the baker of the pie, who A, doesn't want their doggies get disturbed, and B, doesn't want that pie to be stolen. And this just kind of starts a back and forth between protagonist and antagonist, where they have to just react to each other. You can. I think the best example of this is just like your good old Tom and Jerry movie or film. Like it's just a constant back and forth. It's a chase, like cat chases mouse, and then mouse chases cat. That's basically all that plot kind of is. It's just antagonist and protagonist clashing and trying to figure out who comes out on top. Right, now we are actually gonna get a little task done. If you haven't, now's your time to quickly grab a pencil and some paper, or to open up Google Documents, or I don't know, text editor, because now I'm gonna give you the task of creating your own protagonist. Step one. We're just gonna do this like we're just gonna have this be a bit of a brainstorming session for you. Remember what you last ate. Can be breakfast, lunch, dinner, whatever. As long as it's probably tasty for you, it's fine. And now, if your food would have been a person, who would they be? Like pre-eating, not post-eating. Try to think of this food turn person and give them 3 personality points, or like 3 different character traits: a goal, a fear, and a flaw. And yeah, I've allotted like 10 minutes for it. We're just gonna see if that's enough time or too little, or too few. You can imposter how can you remember what I ate a few years ago. That's why there's a whole step dedicated to it. So in my case, when I wrote this, my breakfast was porridge with soyberry jam, and it's like, okay, yeah, porridge itself is not that. It doesn't have this like unique taste that blows you off your socks. So you gotta add a little something to it. So I gave my character the traits of, first of all, they really like company. The more the merrier. They dislike the spotlight. It's probably best for someone else to take. But on the whole, they are sweet and very caring. And now we've got their goal. They're yearning to explore, maybe the world, maybe your taste buds, but they're too scared to try, and they have fear of regretting their own choices. And as a flaw, they are really over reliant on others. So, with all that in mind, yeah, I'll lead you to it. So, now everyone of you should have a protagonist, and hopefully we can put that protagonist to use in just a minute, just a bit. But before we actually get to further working on a protagonist, we're going to go over to the other side. I'm going to take a look at our antagonist. So, this is kind of this is a bit of a rehash from my last lecture on writing antagonists. But to get you everything, to get everyone up to speed, the antagonist is the thing that pushes against your protagonist. Your protagonist wants something, and the antagonist wants the exact opposite, or something that actively interferes with your protagonist, or with the goal of the protagonist. Whatever the protagonist does, the antagonist usually takes offense to that. They are incredibly useful to setting up conflicts, hurdles, obstacles, challenges, everything. It's really just a force that pushes against the protagonist. It doesn't even have to be like a human being. And antagonists of the less magical kind, so antagonists that aren't really humans or creatures, but more like cosmic forces, they are great fun. Like the entire genre of the eldritch horror is just something like, or like cosmic horror more. It's just the antagonist is not a dude, but rather the universe itself, or some just like unknowable ancient cosmic force. I love it. But most importantly, the antagonist doesn't have to be evil. Like many put like antagonist, villain, and bad guy on the same pedestal. That doesn't have to be the case. It all depends on who your protagonist is and what they really want to have, or what they want to do. Maybe your protagonist is a king who wants more land for their people, and the antagonist is like a king who also wants more land for their people, and it's just that their interests conflict with one another. That's all there is to it. Antagonists can be as quick and as simple as that. So, there's also just different types or archetypes of antagonists. You tend to just see those you have some other types, but these are like the common ones. We've got the authority figure. The authority figure just has a lot of power over the protagonist. They are higher up the social ladder. Maybe they're superior, evil bosses. Who else are some good authority figure antagonists? Severus Snape, Miss Finster from Disney's Recess. They're all somewhere higher in the pecking order, and usually the protagonist has to somehow deal with them or try to sneak around them. Then there's the beast type of antagonist, your stock standard feral being that the protagonist needs to usually kill or escape from. They are super powerful, super angry, and that's usually the extent of it. There's the fanatic. The fanatic is someone who they cannot possibly do any wrong because their goals are so noble and they've been given power by gods or whatever. Put Grendel. Yeah. The fanatic is like your, I guess if you were to categorize them, like your evil cult leader, but also just something who's or someone who is so convinced that they are the good guy, or that they are doing it for the greater good, that they don't see the bad they're doing. Usually, the means justify the end justify the means type of characters. Then there's Mother Nature. Mother Nature is like this thing that you just cannot beat. It's super powerful. It doesn't discriminate against friends or foes. Everything that stands in its way can, should, and will perish. Like I don't know, can be an earthquake, can be a tsunami, can be Cthulhu. Something that just cannot be stopped. Maybe avoided or evaded, but not really like or slowed down. But nothing that can actually be stopped. There's the anti-villain. The anti-villain is something that's sprung up more recently. It's really just someone whose work ethics or whose methods aren't too nice. Maybe they really they still have the good the all good in mind, but they just go about it in a really weird way. Those like your Deadpools. They're superheroes, like like superheroes who want to do good and who want to do away with evil people, but yeah, maybe decapitating criminals isn't the best way of going around it. There's the femme fatale, your very attractive, well, usually a female bringer of doom, like there's a lot of those in all the literature, but also like in Indiana Jones, where you've got like this like female Bond who just seduces or tempts the protagonist with something, and they have their own goals. But at the end of the day, usually whoever affiliates themselves with them is gonna end up worse than they started out with. Lastly, we've got the pure evil. They are self-aware, they are flamboyant, confident, and really fun to write. They have almost and just an aura of charisma. You want to see them succeed because they are so fun to just see succeed. But you also just really want to see them lose because, of course, you're going to root for the protagonist. Like characters that you just cannot seem to really hate, like Hades from Disney's Hercules is a good example. Like he's pure evil. He knows that what he's doing is not a good thing, but he just has his way with people or with words. The difference between anti-hero and anti-villain. So usually the anti-hero is it can be a bit more complex than protagonist and not protagonist, but in general the anti well, although I think, yeah, no, I think Abudas is right. So the anti-hero can just be someone who's like misguided, someone who tells themselves that they are not the good guy, they are not the good guy, but in secret they are. Um, you should also probably make a difference between protagonist, antagonist, and main character. The main character is who we are looking through, basically our guy who we are following. If you've ever read a Sherlock Holmes novel, you are not following Sherlock Holmes. You're following Watson. Watson is the main character. He just happens to be not the protagonist because the protagonist is the guy who's calling the shots. Right. Some things that are good to keep in mind when you are writing antagonists. It's just always about power with them. Blind by a flaw but overcome. Yeah, something along those lines should probably work. It really just depends on what character you're writing. I'd say a good anti-hero would be, I don't know, Piccolo or Vegeta from Dragon Ball. Yeah, the protagonist is the one who drives the plot forward. The antagonist is the one who pushes against it, and the main character is usually who uh, who just yeah. The main character is the guy who you're following around. Let's see if there's any other good examples of the main character not being the protagonist. Gotta admit, my mind is going blank right now. Great Gatsby guy. No, what? Oh yeah, right, yeah. I think you can also, yeah, kind of like Gatsby himself is like the protagonist, kind of like the main character, the guy who's calling the shots, the guy who's starting the party. No, if main character is Cyril Geralt, yeah. Um, the main character can also just switch, which is very difficult because sometimes in a different story you suddenly switch to the different side for a couple of chapters. It can get real complicated real fast. But yeah, each antagonist has to hold power over the protagonist in some sort of fashion. Otherwise, the protagonist would just overpower the antagonist and they wouldn't be any more relevant. This can be political power, this can be money, military might. Maybe the antagonist is just way smarter than the protagonist. And you can be really creative. I think there's a line from the Joker in either The Dark Knight or The Killing Joke where he mentioned that, yeah, no, he's put Gotham at the brink of destruction with like some cherry bombs and a bit of gas. Um, if you make if you are writing your antagonist very creatively, just give them something and they'll work with it, and they'll show you their power with this like little trick that they've gotten. What is there? Right, the power dynamics can shift mid-story. This is the power dynamics between the protagonist and the antagonist. So maybe your antagonist is really powerful, but then the protagonist gets a magical sword and now is more powerful, and they kick the antagonist's butt. And because they have been so defeated and they're ashamed, the antagonist goes into hiding and does some research, and they stumble upon this really old spell, and now they're more powerful. It's always a give and take, and it's always just two things clashing and often changing because of it. Competition, yeah, exactly. Thank you, stranger. Yeah, the antagonist is usually the one who reacts to the protagonist. So the protagonist is the one who kind of starts the fight, and the antagonist is the one who tries not to lose. And they just both compete and push against each other, and that's basically all that they're good for. Your villain kind of has to fit the story. If you're writing a children's book, maybe it's not a good idea to have your character or your antagonist be like this morally gray and ambiguous person with 50 pages worth of backstory. If you need a swift villain for like a short quest, nothing's wrong with just picking up like Hulda the Cruel from a bandit something and maybe giving her a cool quirk. Don't overcomplicate things and don't overthink things. As long as that overthinking uh, doesn't fester creativity. Your antagonists, if you are going to write them as a human being, are still human beings. So you can also give them like flaws, goals, wants, motivations, fears, like anything that your protagonist can have. Like it, how cool it would be if you would have this really elaborate puzzle game where you need to overcome the warden of a prison because you're an inmate, and the warden is like allergic to peanuts. So one of the possibilities is just you getting a peanut from somewhere and then tormenting the warden with it. Who knows? You can by giving your characters weaknesses and strengths, you can make them feel more unique. And if you're going for the good old like super villain who's got like henchmen working for him and who's got like this really cool villa that totally screams not the headquarters of the bad guy, you kind of want to make sure that you might explain where like money comes from or why they've got like 500 henchmen working for them. That's the thing that usually gets me with the Saturday evening cartoons with like, super villains, and every week they've got a new like world-ending machine, and we never really told how they've gotten that or why they have the means to create these like cool things of disaster. But all in all, remember to have fun with your villains. And now, task number 2. Quite similar to what we've done with the protagonists, we're going to come up with a bad guy. To still keep in line with the theme of writing what you know, haha, I put a sneaky on you. We're going to try to remember the last time your day like sucked, like really majorly sucked. And then we're going to take this feeling and going to put it into a person or into a being or into an antagonist. Well, we're going to turn it into an antagonist. Can be a person, a being, a force, whatever. How can you turn what you felt the last time your day sucked into something that can ruin, that can and will ruin your protagonist's day? Give the antagonist a goal, a motivation, and power. You want something that threatening, something that I can absolutely have you handling an antagonist every day. So yeah, for my example, when I wrote this, the day before that, I was caught in the rain and I got drenched. So my antagonist is going to be like this weird water creature that crawls over the ocean and it infiltrates humanity. It's got like mind controlling power and seeks revenge because it's an evil spirit, and evil spirits tend to do that. Would be like for a short story, so nothing too elaborate, or like for a short side quest. In this case, would be like a mix of pure evil and the beast archetype. And yeah, again, got like 10 minutes. Have fun with it. You can also still incorporate the personality traits if you want to. Not a mandatory thing, but if it flashes out the antagonist better, then, well, why not? Take a bit more of a further look at the inciting incident. The inciting incident is basically the event that happens and then things start happening and falling into place. So the inciting incident is like the good old reliable way to do things or to start your story. Something happens and your character is now thrown into an unfamiliar situation and they have to handle themselves. It can be dragon attacking the village, can be someone falling ill, the character or the protagonist is thrown out of their comfort zone, and now they have to figure out how to get to this want, and that's kind of the start of the story or the start of the journey. It kind of just shows what the character is made out of. So a more cowardly character would probably, or a more cowardly protagonist would probably panic. They would maybe refuse, decline, or it's like, oh yeah, I'm not the one you're looking for. While a more like brave character would like, oh yeah, let's go. What are we waiting for? It just shows character quite quickly and quite easily. So even when your setup doesn't, even when your setup didn't include everything, you can still use the inciting incident to give the characters some more personality or to just flash them out. The incident itself is not always good, not bad, neither good or bad. It's really just something happening. Like something that's supposed to happen is not going to happen, or something that's not supposed to happen happens. It can be a courier that doesn't arrive. It can be someone who arrives late after shit has already hit the fan. It can be, I don't know, something getting lost, or something getting found that shouldn't have been found. In modern tales, especially in the so-called isekai genre, where the character is usually, well, what's currently like going on is that a lot of stories start with they start with the death of the protagonist. The protagonist dies, and then something happens. They are getting reincarnated. They're getting sent somewhere else. Maybe they have a second shot at life in the same world, and then the story goes on from there. Colloquially, this has been known as getting hit by truck-kun. It comes, sorry, from the like Eastern, the Japanese way of handling things, where usually the protagonist is being run over by a truck. This is a very quick and often very sudden way of kickstarting things. Oftentimes, the issue with that is that the protagonist isn't really given a lot of time to be introduced. So, who they were before the incident becomes kind of irrelevant, and now it's all about how they are going to be after the incident. Yeah, exactly. I would just Western other worlds usually start with a wardrobe, or maybe a giant who just steps into the house and breaks a gun, and then it's like, "Hey, you're a wizard, Harry, come with me." And the magical worlds have the protagonist being run over by a truck. Now, this is something of a bit of an open question for everyone who wants to answer. What do you think is the inciting incident of Lord of the Rings, the Fellowship? So the first part of it. Anyone who wants to answer can answer. Movie or the book? Both adaptations should work, but probably the book. What is the singular incident that starts Frodo's journey?
Meeting Gandalf.
Yeah, that was the question. So that's not the answers. Really, that's a question that everyone still argues about all these years later, because we don't really have a singular incident that happens. You can argue that it's once Bilbo gives Frodo the ring, or once he just leaves. It can be once Gandalf finds out that the One Ring is actually the One Ring. It can be Frodo agreeing to take the ring to Mordor over in Rivendell. Like, the actual inciting incident to get Frodo out, it's not just one thing, but just like multiple. So your very epic story that's going to take like multiple books, and that is slow paced and follows multiple like groups of people. Yeah, there can be loads of inciting incidents and also very long and drawn out incidents. Like, for example, Gandalf going out and researching the One Ring. That takes like years. Like, I don't know how long exactly, but I remember that Gandalf just took years trying to confirm that it is not, in fact, that One Ring. So this just goes to show that an inciting incident can be one singular incident, but it can also just be a long series of things that happen. Okay, so my own take on things. This is just a quick way for me to actually ramble about things. So what we've been seeing in like writing industry and film and everything is that people are trying to be very hectic, or sorry, not hectic, but very hectic with things like that. They're saying, hey, yeah, you need to catch your audience attention on the first page. The audience needs to be hooked by the first quest. This is why most of Elder Scrolls' first quests are very flashy. If you don't hook them immediately, they're going to throw away the game, and then someone else gets their attention, and then they get the money, and you don't get the money. And I don't know about you, but this is like it just builds pressure on the author, and I don't like that trend. I really hate it. I really hate the idea that, oh yeah, competition is all around, so you need to be the absolute best that you can do, and you need to write and study at least 30 hours a day, and nah, ew. You can't please everyone, and you should write because it's fun for you. It's fun for you. You like creating scenes, stories, worlds. Just write for your own sake, because if something that you like, if you create something that you like, chances are someone else gonna like it too. If your story is good, people will read it. Don't like pressure yourself into needing to write the best thing since sliced bread. Don't overthink things. Don't make yourself like all anxious and oh god, I need to do this the best way I can, or else I'll fail. Who cares? Have fun with it. Go out, explore the world, have fun. Like, write what you know, learn. That's all there is to writing. Learning about things and then putting these learned things into words. That's all we do, kinda. Okay. Because I haven't told you enough about Hobbit and Lord of the Rings. I'm sorry, but I've recently reread The Hobbit, so it's all kind of still fresh in mind. For me, the Hobbit, so the book, not the movie. Well, the first movie is good, but the book's better. It's a amazing setup. Like, the first chapter of the Hobbit book is a great way to set up things, or like the first two, even at that. By reading the first one or two chapters, we learn who's the main characters, who's the protagonist, who are the supporting cast, where do they live, and how are they like strung together. So in our case with Bilbo, we learn about his dreams, his goals, his fears. We learn about his past as a Took and as a Baggins, and how these like two parts of him kind of clash sometimes. And we also learn about his day-to-day life in the Shire. And by the time that Bilbo actually leaves with the company, we know enough about him. If your setup or your start is very short, or things get skipped, we don't become familiar with the characters. So we've got a harder time empathizing with them. And we've also got a harder time trying to understand why they're doing things. So the important part to take away from the setup phase, from the prologue, from the start, from the first act, is to set up the why. Why do they want something? How and how do they think they're gonna get that? Like, this want is just important to have. So yeah, I think with Hobbit, the Inciting incident is really just Bilbo agreeing to the adventure. He had the ability to choose between quickly signing the contract and heading off to find the company again, or he could chalk it up to being a very bad night and a very weird dream and just go back to bed. But no, he did take that plunge into the uncertain. He took the chance, and that was the inciting incident. Bilbo's own choice actually made him go out, made him formulate this want, and gave him the motivation to do so, to achieve this want. Okay, here's something on plot structures. We're going to start with the very classic, very old hero's journey, originally known as the medicine journey. This is what over-analyzing and overthinking can do to you. So Campbell was the guy who kind of found out that, hey, a lot of old tales and stories have a similar structure. And then he spent like ages writing out this whole elaborate thing. And yeah, it's I feel like it's an overanalyzed mess, honestly. It's a good skeleton. It's a good way of trying to connect things. But when you are writing something, you shouldn't be like, oh yeah, okay, good. Now I'm in this part of the second act. Now I need to have exactly this one thing happening. Otherwise my story will be all shit. Don't do that. Go with the flow. Just have something that you can refer to if you're going to, if you have a, okay, now I've done this, what do I do next type of deal. So the hero's journey is super easy. So we've got the call to adventure. We've got something happening, and the protagonist is drawn out, but they refuse because it's so comfortable in their own village. Usually something then comes along, like a mentor figure, to give him a kick in the butt to actually do the thing. They go out, they explore, and they are being beaten down. They are totally unexplored. They are totally unprepared, and they are going to get beaten down and hurting, and then they start trying to improve and trying to get better. In the original like medicine journey context, it's usually a mother getting sick or like a different family member getting sick, and the protagonist has to actually go out and fetch some medicine for them. The hero goes to like a lot of journeys, a lot of adventures, small side stories, meets like really important people, gets tempted but doesn't go into this, or doesn't fall to temptation. Then they change due to it. They're going to the hero or the protagonist goes through a bit of a change, a character arc, so to speak. They grow from what they've experienced, and then they have to return, but they don't want to. But something still tells them that they need to. And if you want to experience the hero's journey step by step, just watch Star Wars. Like Lucas like took the hero's journey and put it step by step into the thing, into the story there. Now for some fun parts. I'm going to just show you a couple of really good old reliable ways to start and tell stories, and just how to set up dynamics between protagonist and antagonist. Campbell was the guy who kind of figured out that the medicine journey is a thing, or that the medicine that a lot of different like texts in classic literature follow a certain pattern, and then he called this pattern the medicine journey. We nowadays know it as the hero's journey. But yeah, let's go back to all reliable. So we've got the quest. This is kind of the medicine journey, but not really, but a bit more a bit simpler. The protagonist has to go out and get the thing. I should probably explain what a MacGuffin is. A MacGuffin is a term coined by Hitchcock, and it's basically an important item that's important because characters want it. It's got a lot of like importance to the characters, but not to the audience. It can be the Holy Grail, the Lost Ark, can be a cool wand, or can be it's just something that all the spies are after, but you don't know why. Links are allowed, don't worry about it. The quest has the protagonist setting out to find said MacGuffin. And the important part about this one is just that we need to know the why. The motivation is key here. The protagonist, if you want to go with a quest type of story, your character would need to travel. They're going to have to be eternally on the move, deal with things, visit places, and one stop on their journey should always like either be a setup for the next one or should be because of the previous one. I think the last Airbender is a good like example for that. So you start in the south of the continent or the world, and you have to go north. But Aang and his crew like go zigzag, and they get into hijinks and shenanigans, and then these shenanigans usually catch up with them quite quickly. So let's say your character moves about and he thinks that the MacGuffin is in a like dank cave in a dark dungeon. He breaks open the door and he goes in, goes out, didn't find the thing, and then in the next village over, he's being greeted by an angry mob because the thing that he just crashed open was in fact a crypt for like, I don't know, the local priest, and the priest accidentally died in there, and now he's back to haunt everyone. So stop B should usually be sorry, the reason for stop B to exist should be because something in stop A happened. That's the important gist with quest type of stories. Lastly, it's really good to have a sidekick for this one. If you're going to still have like Lord of the Rings or Hobbit here, give your Frodo a Samwise. A sidekick is really good for the protagonist so that the protagonist can bounce ideas off of him and they can just both talk with one another, and this fleshes them out for the audience. And if you want to have a good fun twist at the end, make sure that what the protagonist finds isn't what they came for in the beginning. That's like, it's a fun plot twist. It's the good old the real treasure is the friends made along the way type of thing. It's old, but it's always there for a good laugh. Then we've got the adventure type of story. It's fairly similar to the quest, but here it's not the MacGuffin that's important. It's the actual journey. It's the people met and the locations traveled. Here, the environment is really important. You want to have your worlds be looking and feeling really cool and really unique. The character or the protagonist still moves around to eventually reach that want, but the environment is in the spotlight here. A lot of adventures also include romance, like, you know, damsel in distress turned into lover, or the very good and I'm just a sucker for the good old childhood friends turned lovers trope, so that's also something that you can add here. For the quest type of story, the protagonist usually went through a character arc. Here, it's less important. They can, but they don't have to. We just want to still keep in mind that we need a reason why the protagonist actually moves about and why they explore, apart from simple curiosity. The next one is the pursuit type of story. It's basically a big game of tag. Protagonist and antagonist just chase each other, or it changes, and then the protagonist chases the antagonist, but then the antagonist chases the protagonist. That's fine. The important part about it is that you put the protagonist into a location, and then you fill that location with people who want to catch the protagonist. Maybe he's got something important. Maybe he's not allowed to live. Those are all really good starts to a pursuit type of story. John Wick, the third one, is a pursuit story, and it's good because it just shows how much you can. It just shows how much you can do with very little. The audience needs to know that there's a real danger to being caught. You can catch the protagonist temporarily, but often it's then followed by a escape sequence. And lastly, you got to make sure that the pursuer has a good chance of actually catching the protagonist. If the protagonist is just so lofty and so light-footed that there's no hope of ever catching him, then there's no real tension that's going to be built. And lastly, the smaller the area of the chase, the bigger the tension, because there's less wiggle room for both protagonist and antagonist, and pursued and pursuer. There's also the rescue type of story. So the rescue is your good old, like, oh yeah, save the damsel in distress. Doesn't have to be a damsel. Could also just be someone who's like, I don't know, it's the rescue thing. You have the victim, the antagonist, and the protagonist. The antagonist has the victim, and the protagonist wants to take the victim back. Easy as that. Important here is character development. You want to make sure that the audience knows who's who, and you kind of need to ensure that the protagonist stays the protagonist, the antagonist stays the antagonist, and that the victim stays the victim. You shouldn't move things out about too often, or else it'll get messy. Which is to say that it's how would you put it? The motivations are easily overlookable when you suddenly change the roles in the story. Okay, who's now rescuing who? Who is rescuing whom? That's like the whole thing that you can run into if you're not careful with this. In most rescue things, it's like, okay, yeah, we are the good guys and the antagonist is the bad guy. Or we are the bad guys and the antagonist is the good guy who wants to keep someone locked up for their own good. Who knows? You can be a bit lofty about that, but you want to make sure that there's a proper black and white thing going on, that the protagonist has to actually move out, like the lair of the evil guy has to be somewhere very far away. Otherwise, your rescue thing is going to be very short. You want to also make sure that the protagonist and the antagonist have a good relationship. Not good in the sense of they are friends, but good in the sense of being fleshed out. And also the antagonist should annoy the protagonist every step of the way. Like, maybe they're the evil wizard and they're going to send minions. Maybe they are stepping out maybe they are stepping outside the tower as well to just fuck around with the protagonist so that they can't reach the thing. That's all a rescue thing is. That's all a rescue quest is. A plot story, yeah. Yeah, exactly. You could rescue an animal from a bad owner. That also works. As long as you've got a good, as long as you've got a clear, good, evil thing going on. Because once you get to morally gray things, it's hard to spin a good motivation. Apart from, oh yeah, the guy over there kidnapped my best friend and I want him back. There's the escape story. It's a prison break, really. Your character is put in a tight situation, and the whole story is about them trying to find a way out of it. In Quest and Rescue, just about going to a place and getting a thing, a person. What's the difference between them? with the rescue, the antagonist is way more involved. And also, you don't have this whole like A leads to B type of thing going on with the rescue. So the protagonist's actions at pit stop A are not that important to the protagonist's actions at pit stop B, because usually in both cases it's the antagonist doing some sort of fuckery with the protagonist. What else there? Right, the protagonist usually has very little power, and they have to get or obtain power to get out. In most cases, it's the third time, or it's the third attempt that's going to succeed. Here again, we've got the rule of three. Have the protagonists escape fail twice, and have the third one be the one that's successful, or the other way around, which is also really cool to see. Have the protagonists escape attempt succeed twice. Like maybe they're getting further and further away from their cell, but then the third and final one, that one fails, and now they're back to square one, and they have to improvise, adapt, overcome whatever hurdles are now flung their way. There's the revenge story. Very gritty, but also really fun to write. The protagonist wants to enact revenge on the antagonist for some perceived plight. Can be a proper injustice done, like maybe the antagonist killed the protagonist's parents, or maybe something imagined. That, okay, yeah, someone killed my parents, and there's this evil wizard dude in the power in the tower right over there. It's got to be him. Since it actually came up in the Arcane Tavern recently, technically all Kingdom Come Deliverance is a revenge type of quest or a revenge type of story. Henry wants A, the sword back, and B, wants to make sure that the bastards who killed his parents pay dearly for it. Here we've got an instance where the protagonist is better off being morally grey. Whatever justice they're delivering is usually the vigilante type of justice that's not really within legal bounds. Like, think Batman. Whatever he does, it's probably not really legal, but try stopping him. Here, we also want to make sure that we give the protagonist a really good reason why they are setting out to ruin someone's life. In most cases, it's them being like hella desperate. The protagonist has been pushed to the edge, pushed to the brink, and now they actually have to retaliate. If you have a protagonist that's gonna go on a revenge quest for like a little something, that doesn't really make them too empathetic, and that easily runs the risk of making the protagonist seem like the bad guy. And we kind of want to stay within the gray area with this one. Two more tips. Punishment doesn't need to fit the crime. So if your protagonist if the antagonist stole something from the protagonist and the protagonist wishes death upon the antagonist and his family, that's fine if you can justify it. Lastly, plans. People love plans. If your character or if your protagonist is the type of person to make plans and to plan ahead, having this plan be executed and then either succeed or fail is really good potential. People love it. I swear to God, we only have a couple more left to go. There were originally 20 types of stories, but I had to actually break that down. I've got a proper book about the types of stories and how to set them up, and I tried to like break this book down as far as possible. I can put in the name later in the chat. So we've got the riddle type of story. The riddle is, as probably noticeable, it's really just a riddle. It's your mystery story. Something is hidden in plain sight. Something is hidden in plain sight, and the protagonist needs to figure out who done it. Maybe someone killed someone else and the protagonist is a detective. Maybe the protagonist can't find the key to his home, and all that's left of the door hole is, I don't know, a sticky note with a riddle on it. Can be something as simple as that. With a riddle story, the tension comes from things happening that shouldn't happen, or things that that don't happen when they should happen. You kind of want to keep the audience on their toes with this one, and have them take nothing for granted. And also to give a bit more, like, to make the audience more engaged in your story, make them at least feel like they're able to come up with the solution themselves. It doesn't have to be the actual solution. It can be like little breadcrumbs that follow a different trail. Just make them feel like they might be able to piece the puzzle together. Yeah, setup is important. You kind of want to know why the protagonist is doing stuff and why they want to solve this riddle. And the antagonist should have a reason for setting up this riddle or the mystery. A cliffhanger, if placed at the end here, is really cheeky and a good way to make your audience start the next quest or buy the next book or read the next story or read the next chapter. That's something that what's his face? Tarantino does incredibly well. So if you've ever watched a Tarantino movie, cliffhangers are everywhere in dialogue, even at that. I think the first couple of lines in Pulp Fiction is just a cliffhanger. It's like, okay, yeah, we can't do this. This is too dangerous. And then the audience wants to know, okay, but what is too dangerous? What are they talking about? You can always fit in little cliffhangers in dialogue, in quests, at the end of chapters, to just have the audience want to know what's next. You can either be vague about it, so that they're like, okay, yeah, they're vague about it, so it's going to be explained in the next page. Or more often than not, something really dramatic happens at the last page, and then the chapter ends, or the book is over, and to find out what happened next, and if the characters are actually still alive, buy the next one, or start the next quest. So there's the temptation type of story. Your typical like D&D warlock backstory, basically. Your character has a wand, and someone offers the goal. Like, okay, yeah, you want the snow cone? I can give you the snow cone on one condition. This is your typical like Faustian thing, like your Faustian type of story. The protagonist gave into temptation, and then the whole like second and third act is the protagonist trying to deal with the fact that they gave in, and B, them trying to reclaim what they've lost, or just dealing with their grief, pain, the inner turmoil. It's a very human one, and this type of story in particular needs well-established characters. The one is important, motivation is important, and you also probably want to make sure that your protagonist is desperate enough to take up the temptation. Yeah, the protagonist's inner turmoil is important, kind of giving the audience a way to peek into the protagonist's head is important. So with the temptation story, usually, if not always, the main character is also the protagonist. Because the good part about the main character is that we can peek into the main character's head. When we read the story, we can read their thoughts, which is quite useful to like just show off what they're feeling deep within, but what they're not saying. If you want to go the extra mile here, you can also include the 5 stages of grief. You can Google that. Again, write what you know. If you don't know something, Google and find out. There's a couple of stages that usually involve grieving people, like acceptance and denial and anger and bargaining, stuff like that. Then we've got the coming of age story. Your character or your protagonist starts a bit on the younger side. There's some stories that start with literal birth and then like first and second year of them being like a toddler. This one is more fun the more character flaws the protagonist has. Maybe they can't read, maybe they're dumb. They've got like two left hands, like not literally but figuratively. The more character flaws your coming of age character has, the more things he has to work on and to improve upon. And the whole story revolves around the character becoming a better person by either learning to deal with their own flaws or maybe even being able to turn those flaws into positives. Maybe they can conquer a fear, or they learn how to deal with their like short temper. Here we have to go step by step. Show who your protagonist is prior, during, and after, and the doing is the important part. Changes need to be slow and gradual. And your protagonist is, well, they have to be allowed to make mistakes. A good character arc always sees the protagonist or the antagonist making mistakes and falling back a step. You know, like it's pretty much the like whole 3 steps. It's 3 steps towards something and then 1 step back. A good example for a believable character arc is Zuko from the Last Airbender, where he starts out as an antagonist and then has like his own whole journey. He makes mistakes. He gives into temptation. He once again becomes he's insecure, and he falls back upon his evil ways. But in the end, he prevails, and that's really endearing, and that is just amazing to witness. However, for maturity, usually there's a price to be paid. Let's say if the protagonist learns to be a bit more adult, to be more responsible, they often sacrifice like childish innocence for it, something along those lines. There's often just a price to be paid in order to make the final jump and to complete the character arc. There's your love story. Romeo and Juliet, the cheesy stuff, the stuff that makes even the author cry. Here, the obstacle usually comes from the two lovers being ill-suited, but still wanting to be with one another, but they can't, or they're not supposed to be, or like I don't know, their character flaws drive the conflict forward, or push the conflict forward. So maybe like date night stuff, or like that's the obligatory date night arc or small like chapter, and person 1 doesn't know that person B has a peanut allergy. I don't know why I keep coming back to peanut allergies. It's always a give and take. So both have to be ill-suited, but also really in love with one another for this thing to make sense. And happy endings are not required. While Hollywood and AAA loves happy endings and happily ever afters, the best stories have tragic ends because they are way more memorable than that. Like a bit of a bittersweet thing at the end. That just makes people weep and love the story, and it's great. The important part about the love story is that the characters have to be believable. You kind of gotta give them a reason why they love each other, and you also need to make them sound reasonable in their actions and their reactions to, I don't know, perceived plights or the good old, oh God, did I step over my boundaries? Did I say something that drove them mad? But at the end of the day, love story is always a story about how love has to be deserved and how it is earned but not gifted. It's quite the old story, but stories have a habit of being old. Right. Second to last one, I think. There's the sacrifice story. The sacrifice story can be very cheesy. It's like, oh yeah, go on without me. I'm not going to be able to make it. Usually, a sacrifice story has incredibly high stakes, since it is often the protagonist that is sacrificing themselves. And the whole story then just deals around either the supporting cast having to deal with the sacrifice, can be sacrifice of a life, or of something less life-threatening. Like, I don't know, maybe the protagonist loses an eye or a hand or an arm, and the whole story is them trying to just bounce back from the sacrifice. They can just deal with the consequences. And the plot absolutely has to force the protagonist to take these measures, and there can't be a alternative to it. There cannot be like, oh yeah, what if there's a different way? No, can't be with a sacrifice story. If there's a different way, the different way is often worse. You also want to focus on the moral dilemma of like sacrifice. It's the good old trolley problem. There's a trolley or a wagon or a train driving onto a track where like 5 people are bound to the track, where in like the good old Western style, and you've got the possibility of cranking the lever, but the other train wreck has a couple like less people on it. I disagree with the levels earned trope. Ooh, do you mind elaborating on that a bit? But yeah, okay. While Tutve is formatting out their ideas, let's really shoot through the last one. The Wretched Access story. Wretched Access is so if you've got good character arcs, there's also bad character arcs. This is a story where there's a bad character arc. You can also call it the oh god, it's on the tip of my tongue. The corruption arc. There we go. Where a character goes from good to bad, or from bad to worse. Usually, it's a moral decline or a psychological decline. The character starts noble, but then becomes more hateful or selfish over the course of the story, and then at the end, they are like a little puddle. Exactly. Better Call Saul, Breaking Bad, these are all Wretched Access type of stories, where characters have their own choices, and they make the choices that somehow ends up being the worst choice possible. And the important part here is that the main character, or the protagonist, has to have a flaw that is going to be pounded into the dirt. That's just like being used over and over and over again. Let's use Breaking Bad here as an example. Walt is incredibly proud, and the pride is basically his downfall. So, like, over the course of the story, his pride is getting challenged, and there's like a lot of instances where the audience is like, okay, yeah, no, don't agree to that challenge. You are fine the way you are. Things are running smoothly. Don't take the risk. And then Walt takes the risk because he's so proud of it, and everything just goes into shambles. With Better Call Saul, it's Jimmy's way of cutting corners that gets him into trouble. It's a character flaw that leads the player that leads the protagonist down a rabbit hole. And what's important is to actually just show it. However, you have to make this decline sympathetic. The poor, unfortunate soul has to be developed. Give them a reason why they do this. For Better Call Saul, for Jimmy, it's like his whole relationship with his brother and everything. and his like there's this like weird family thing going on. However, don't have your character pull a Daenerys. Don't have your character like be mad suddenly and commit crimes that are inexcusable. Remember that the audience still needs to root for your protagonist, and if you have your protagonist commit horrible crimes, they don't they tend to lose this empathy for the protagonist. And as a good example for like just how easily a story can be set up and have a fun twist, let's go with the Frimskave. That's a song from the Old Norse Edda. So we've got Thor, Loki, and Thrym. Thor is like god of thunder, has a big hammer. Sorry, it has Mjolnir, who's and Mjolnir is not a big hammer, but he kills big things, the giants. Like Thor is a giant slayer first and foremost. Then we've got Loki, who's often enough portrayed as this really charismatic guy, but he has a tendency to have really bad ideas when he's bored. Like he's gonna pull pranks that he thinks are funny, but everyone agrees that these pranks are not nice. And lastly, we've got Thrym, who is the antagonist here. And the whole story is all about Thrym, like the big giant stealing Mjolnir. And in order to get Mjolnir, so Thrym only wants to give Mjolnir back should he get the goddess Freya as his wife. Freya is the goddess of love and marriage. Freya obviously declines. So Thor and Loki have to find a way to still get Mjolnir back, despite the proposed deal from Thrym not really being able to be fulfilled. So what do? In classic Nordic fashion, Loki has the idea to disguise Thor as Freya, as a bride. And the whole story just deals with Thor and Loki in the like wedding reception area, trying to come off as a genuine like a bride and a bridesmaid. And Loki has to use his cunning and his cleverness to explain to the other guests why this goddess of love is suddenly drowned. This is like emptying like barrels worth of meat and eating multiple oxes, and why he's got like and why the bride has so bad table manners. And that's the whole story. Like stories can be as easy as that. Grab a protagonist, maybe give him a sidekick, have an antagonist, and something in between that they push for and or against. Both want to have Mjolnir, or like they've got a conflict of interests. That's the word here. Thor wants Mjolnir back, but Thrym won't let him. But Thrym wants Freya, but Freya doesn't really want to. And that's the whole story about it. So, like, it's really just a matter of who you have as established characters and then what they would do. Granted, this story is a bit more, let's call it less serious in tone. It's still very fun. It just goes to show you can have fun with already well-established characters. Okay. Tips and tricks when it comes to like plots and structuring them and coming up with them. First and foremost, choices and consequences. I've already touched upon this earlier, but action A should ideally lead to problem B. Not in every story, but in most of them. If you connect the protagonist's choices to consequence later down the line, that makes that just knits everything tightly together. Your audience will get a sense that, first of all, this thing has been planned out, and second of all, that it just becomes a bit more believable, if not realistic. So let's go back to the whole pie idea with the pie on the windowsill. Let's say the protagonist takes the pie and then it's revealed that the pie was a birthday present for a poor little girl, and she's now really sad, and the protagonist now has to find a way to cheer up the girl, or a different type of consequence. Let's say you've got a good old bar brawl going on, like a tavern brawl, like what you would have seen in Jackie Chan movies, for example. And someone breaks a mug. And what's the consequence to that? Let's say the mug is like a really important memento to a mafioso's grandma who's already 6 feet under. This is like a good way to just make the story go into a bit of a different direction than initially planned. It's really good for plot twists, and it just gives you the feeling that the protagonist, the protagonist is on this journey because they absolutely want or have to, because the protagonist still chases after this want that they have, after their goal or their motivation. Let's see what else there. There's power and scope creep. That's something that that I tend to read sometimes in student work and also like in work over in uni, where like the story starts out as, oh god, it's a family feud, and not like half a page further, and suddenly we are at intercontinental war with gods involved. That's a case of things escalating very quickly, and I would recommend that you try to keep that from happening. Only involve gods if you actually have to. So if it's a story about gods, if it's a story about, I don't know, two people chasing a goose, there's no need to go any higher than, let's say, the constable or the police officer. It's really easy to lose yourself in the like tension and the drama of everything, but yeah, just try to keep power and scope creep to a minimum. Okay, yeah, you've got this really cool idea for a quest, and hey, what if this quest has like at least 3 endings, and then each ending leads to a different quest? Sounds like a very entertaining story. It sounds like a very entertaining story, but I can probably tell you that it's probably going to end up a mess if you try to throw it out. The issue with involving like gods and kings and everything like that is that is once you involve those, usually you get to earth-shattering proportions, where there's like a war going on that like, I don't know, destroys entire continents, and planets get absorbed, and I'm not calling you out, sorry. This was actually the story I've referenced was something I've actually read over in uni when we had to write some short stories and then critique them. And one of the other students it started out with like a very cute sibling rivalry or like a bit of a family feud, and it just became like full-on godly war. Yeah, exactly, stranger. If you have world-ending stories left and right, they kind of lose their impact and their oomph. That's also something that you got to keep in mind when you write tragic stuff, or mostly tragic stuff. That's something I've also noticed, is that basically if everything is doom and gloom, nothing is. You need ways to break the tension. If the player is on the edge of their seat all day, every day, they kind of get not bored of it, but it's more of a, okay, I need a breather now. Okay, then Abel, yeah, good point. That just goes to show you how things can escalate and how authors have escalated things in the past. What else? Right, planning. It's good if you have a good plan over your main storyline, but you don't need to give every like small minute side character a 50-page background. You can have things stay fairly simple, maybe build upon it if need be, but don't uh, d- don't make up an entire village where every villager has has more than a page of backstory. You'll quickly lose sight of the important part. Yeah, exactly. That's also the urgency in main stories. That's something that was really flabbergasting to me with Skyrim's main quest. Like Skyrim's main quest is all about urgency. It's the end of the world. Do it now. And afterwards, suddenly Angas are like, "Oh yeah, how are they going to remember you?" It really feels like with Skyrim, you are supposed to do the main quest first, and then everything else afterwards, which is weird. Something that we have probably already touched upon in other like Elder Scrolls related media is the unreliable narrator. People are dumb, people are biased. You can make this work for you. So if you don't want to explain a whole lot of stuff, just have the character rationalize the reason for things. It also just makes your world a bit more believable if your farmer doesn't know about like I don't know, weird magics and how the sun's actually a hole in the sky. So yeah, you can you can have you can have your supporting cast bounce off ideas of each other and then have this like kind of work out to a bit of better world building. I hope I'm making sense here. What else? Right. Something always changes with the story. In a story, the plot can change, which is a plot twist usually, but in most cases, what changes in the story is either the character or the location. It just don't try to dwell on the same topic forever and ever and ever. You kind of just need to switch things up from here and there. People change, people adapt. But nevertheless, when you are writing something, keep scope in mind. Like things can get out of hand real fast. Your 3-page misc quest assignment can suddenly turn into a 27-page quest behemoth. We would call that a learning experience on how not to keep things short. So when you start with the story, you kind of always want to have in the back of your mind how big it should be or how lengthy it could be. If you've got a quest that's like, I don't know, a page or two over, it's all right. Reread your thing and then edit the quest to make it fit the parameters. That's something that happens all the time in professional writing, in quest design. Like things have multiple iterations. Characters change in concepting. Dialogues change. Maybe a line here is added or taken away there. A plot point changes. Maybe a character motivation. That is to say that over the course of you finishing your story, you have to absolutely reread it to make sure that what you've started is still what you kind of ended with. When in doubt, well, just kill your darlings. Kill your characters, kill your characters in the quests. That always works, but also just kill the entire quest document. Maybe put it in a different folder somewhere and forget about it for another year or two. But you shouldn't be scared about losing progress or losing this like really cool idea that you've had, because trust me, you're going to have at least 3 way better ideas at the end of what you've just wrote than the one that you started with. Lastly, once again, please leave Lady Luck at the door, outside in the pouring rain. Don't let her in. Yeah, and come back a day or two after you think it's complete. That's a good way of putting it. That's something I've done with writing the Atmoran main quest. that whenever I write, whenever I finish writing a part of the main quest, I'm just gonna put it somewhere else and then work on something else, and then come back to it, sleep on it. Exactly. Yeah. That just helps you reevaluate your own writing a lot. Okay. Oh, with that all now finished. God, it's been over. It's been a year, an hour. Okay, cool. Let's go with task 3. Let's actually get the pitch going. So, I want you to take another look at your protagonist and a look at your antagonist and see what could make them click. What could the antagonist do that could hurt the protagonist? And what part of the protagonist's want could conflict with the antagonist's want? Once you've got that figured out, I want you to come up with a very simple inciting incident. Like, it can be fairly simple. Like, something falls over, something breaks. The protagonist is called to grab something. You can use the plot types that I've laid out before. You can think of a good genre, because genre is also always important. You are probably not going to be doing a high stakes pursuit story when it's a comedic story. You only have antagonists. That should with only antagonists. The antagonist is the guy who reacts to the protagonist. Yeah, you can just quickly make up a protagonist, something really simple. The pitch we've had for the protagonist was try to remember the last thing you've eaten and then turn that into a person. So yeah, come with a genre and a sidekick, and also please explain why the sidekick is there. In case of Sam, it's, oh yeah, he's loyal to Frodo, he's their gardener. Obviously someone has to do it. Or, I don't know, the sidekick of the antagonist, or let's say the protagonist is an evil wizard and the sidekick is a thrall, or maybe just like the hireling, a mercenary, whoever. And yeah, we've got about 10 minutes to work on that, and then we get to the last slide. In my example, the protagonist was based on porridge, like, very helpful, very sweet, but scared to go out or to be out and about and explore. And the antagonist is like this weird demon that has mind control powers and wants to have revenge on humankind. And with my quick pitch, it was a very simple thing. It's a temptation story. So the protagonist was deceived by the antagonist, who took over a villager. So, oh yeah, can you do this thing for me? Sure, person I know. And then it turns out that the person that the protagonist was talking to was the antagonist. Antagonist lets the protagonist fetch a MacGuffin, and then the village is destroyed. Despair, the protagonist's childhood friend, I'm always a sucker for the childhood friend trope, gets him back on his feet, and then they embark on a journey to take back the MacGuffin and trying to deal with the protagonist's guilt. Like, this small pitch, like these 2 bullet points, are enough for, depending on how long you want it to be. It can be enough for like a 30-page long quest. It can be an entire book. It can be like a short story. So yeah, good luck with that. If you've got questions, don't hesitate to ask.